Welcome back. Welcome back to Open Your Eyes, and we're moving now into our second segment for the morning. This one is all about the growth of Belize's economy. Where was it? Where is it now? And where do we intend to have the economy in the next, in actually the future? In to talk to us about it, we've got the Minister of State and the Ministry of Finance, none other than the Honorable Christopher Coye. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome and Happy New Year.
Same to you both.
But when do we stop saying that to people?
I think maybe February.
February?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think so.
Doesn't hurt.
But Minister, it's nice to have you in. I feel this is one of the conversations that people need to understand, because for the most part, we'll hear the rumblings, and for the most part, when the country is being given maybe some kind of grant, people expect to get $5 in their pocket, but they don't know where those monies have got to go, the taxes that they have to pay, what's going on. So let's talk about Belize's economy. From whence you found it when you got there. And I want to go there simply because people need to understand where you were, where they know, and where you want to go. That's the best way to understand how life is. So let's start there.
Well, it's a pity we only have 20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah.
But there's a lot to tell. Where we were, certainly we were not in a good place. When you talk about numbers, we were suffering an economic contraction, a recession, shrinking roughly 13.5% back in 2020. Unemployment was way up there, unprecedented numbers, around 30%. You all know about our debt to GDP had peaked by the end of December 2020 at around 133%.
Wow.
So everything was dire. Fiscally, the government's position, we had a revenue shortfall of over 30%. That means a hole in the budget of over $300 million. So clearly, we were in a severe deficit position fiscally, over 10% primary and higher on the overall balance. So the government of the day was borrowing roughly $1 million a day just to make payroll, just to pay regular bills. So it was completely unsustainable where we were, and that leads into what we had to do. Certainly, looking at the government's public finances, that's where you have to start effectively. Having the shortfall in revenue, you can't increase taxes in a time of severe recession. So you have to look on the expenditure side. So on the expenditure side, you have to look at the major expenditure categories, which obviously was one of which was the wage bill. And so that we had to make tough decisions there. We had to slash government expenditures on public wages, but also on goods and services items. And of course, we had to renegotiate the debt to bring down the debt servicing obligations. Our debt servicing obligations are upwards of 30% of our overall budget. So we had to immediately tackle all those key items and see how we could dramatically bring those down and in effect flip the fiscal position. We were in overdraft, almost $100 million. We really had to actually change the law. Otherwise, we would have been breaking the Central Bank Act because of the level of overdraft that we were in. So early in 2021, we had to actually change the law, even before we rescheduled debt and renegotiated debt. So that's a lot of what we had to do immediately, those immediate action items that we had to take on.
Given that the world was already in a plunging recession in 2020 when you all came into government, and notwithstanding the Ukraine war at the beginning of 2020, well, end of 2021 into 2022, how was your ministry able to create these sort of wiggle rooms to bring up our GDP rate? And I ask that because, you know, our regular civilian might not feel like they have like that we're in any kind of way out with economic growth. So can you discuss the process of how you all went about into bring up our GDP rate, given the fact that the world is in a global recession, and how the layman, when will the layman feel like we're going through some sort of economic growth?
Well, I think I'm not sure I agree with all the
Of
statements
course.
that you made. Certainly, when we talk about the economy is not just about the government.
Right.
The government forms a significant component of the economy, but the economy is all of us,
Yeah.
and what we do and how productive we are. So government's role is to foster economic growth, encourage, enable, have that enabling environment. And I think that is what the government did and continues to do. When we look at what transpired over 2021, not only did we focus on improving public finances, but at the same time, we looked at how we could encourage and stimulate economic activity. So early in 2021, I think we were a little aggressive in opening up the northern border, the Corozal free zone, and we're early in opening that up, and then pushing on tourism, opening back up tourism activity.
Yes.
So efforts along those lines continued in agriculture,
Yes,
the cattle exports, etc. And those have an impact. Those certainly make a difference as far as what kind of economic activity, money flowing, and when money is flowing, that's income for everybody.
And we were taking a leap of faith at that particular time, especially with the advent of COVID.
Yes, absolutely. But yes, when you get economic activity going, money flowing, income for you, when you get your income and you spend, that expenditure is income for somebody else.
Yes.
So that you increase that velocity of money flow, and that rising tide lifts all boats. So certainly moving along that line, encouraging economic activity was one of those focus areas for the government from a policy standpoint. While we were making our efforts on the fiscal position, the results certainly reflect the policy positions being being a sensible approach. In terms of 2021, our economy grew, almost completely recovered from the losses of 2020. I mentioned we had about 13.4% economic contraction in 2020. In 2021, our economy grew 15.2%. So we grew faster than we contracted. The unemployment rate came down to 9.2% by September of last year. The debt to GDP ratio came down dramatically to the high 80s, from 133%. And this year, those efforts have continued to bear fruit. So in terms of where the results are right now, the debt to GDP ratio is below 70%. No, it's 69%. We are almost 5 plus years ahead of target in terms of where we are. The IMF is now saying you actually are in a sustainable position, and we can look at being more flexible in what we do. The economy is continuing to grow. I think in the first quarter we grew at around 5.3%. The second quarter we grew at 13.5%. And the third quarter, which the results will come out, I think, officially next week, and the numbers are reflecting a near 13% continued growth. In terms of unemployment, I mentioned how we came down dramatically to 9.2%. That has continued to decrease. The last labor force survey, those results I expect will be published next week, and I think you will see that the unemployment rate has fallen almost around 5%. So that's unprecedented. That's never occurred in Belize in its history, having unemployment rate around 5%. People also talk about underemployment, and underemployment is a difficulty, but last year it was at 18.9%. This year it's going to be, it is from the results around a little under 7%. So even the underemployment rate has fallen dramatically.
So given that, I appreciate the step-by-step breakdown, but I have to ask in the terms of the general population and how. Well, I can only speak for myself, how I feel when I probably go to the store or something like that. And the reality is that where we feel as a community that we're not feeling that growth, and that's why I asked, when do you suspect that the general population will feel that yes, we are coming out, or we are at a particular stability? Because we all understand we're going through a recession. We're still going through a global recession. This year, I think we're going to still be at the same level as we were last year. So notwithstanding the fact that you have underemployment, and we still feel that we perhaps can't afford certain resources and products, when do you suspect that the layman will begin to feel the fruits of this labor?
Maybe with the fall of gasoline, because
and that was where my next question was going to go, in terms of what makes fuel. What is it about fuel as a resource that has it to fluctuate so much in price? But the
next question. So primarily what's
my first question.
I think that it's not a simple question. It's not a simple answer. You certainly have a lot of positives, but it's not like we were in a good place before. Right. It's not that we have reached a good place yet, and we have a long way to go to get to that good place. The economic improvement, the economic emergence of Belize still means that we are early in the stage of our development. Right. It's not a question of recovery. It's a development, a transformation that we are on a path of. But as much as there is that growth, there are also the challenges of inflation. So inflation, I think, in its full perspective, Belize has been a country of low inflation. We've had exchange control regulations, currency controls that have played a role in keeping inflation down. I think for, let's say, the past decade, our average annual inflation rate has been less than 1%. But in 2021, 2022, that has changed dramatically. 2021, I think the annual inflation rate increased to around a little under 3.5%. That sounds low, but that's what, almost 5 times what it normally was. In this year, the average or the annual inflation rate is projected to end at around 6.2%.
Wow.
So that is almost 9 times.
But this is worldwide.
Well, I'll get to that.
Sure.
So our annual inflation rate for this year is extremely high for Belize. In the region and in the world, we've been suffering from inflation rates caused by various factors. All our trading partners, our regional brothers, have inflation rates higher than us. I think the US is 8-9%, so that's 30% plus higher than us. But yet that's still high, and that impacts on our cost of living, our standard of living. And for us, a lot of the inflation that we have is imported. We have a high import bill, Fuel, in particular, you referred to, has a significant impact on what our prices look like. But supply chain issues of last year had already impacted on inflation. As I mentioned, how it had increased almost fivefold from last year. This year, that's exacerbated by the war in Ukraine and the impact that on not only on fuel prices, but on fertilizer costs that directly impact on food prices. So all of those certainly have a role to play in inflation. And so when we look at fuel, for example, that's certainly not something that we can control.
Right.
What we can control is the type of energy we utilize. So now there's that shift into solar energy, and Belize, I think, has to take on that decision to move into solar so that we do not depend on the fuel bill.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about wanting the fuel prices to come down, but what does that mean? That means more.
We have to replace it with something else.
If we want to shift away from that. If not, actually we're contributing to carbon emissions, even more so. So we have to take that bigger picture look and look at what we can do to become more resilient, more independent, energy independent. We import over 40% of our electricity, for example, from Mexico. How can we shift away from that? Solar provides a solution. So that's something that we have to urgently look at as priority issues. But in terms of the impact on the inflationary impact of fuel prices, those are things that we cannot control. And in fact, as a policy decision, what the government did was to look at how do we do a price stabilization mechanism to put in place so that the price didn't go even higher than where it was in Belize. Now that has cost us. In terms of excise duties, we've lost over almost $30 million by reducing excise duties so that we could fix the price. So when prices went up on the world market, it wasn't going up here. Now it's finally coming down.
Right.
And so that's why you see the fuel prices in Belize starting to come
Slowly.
down. Yes, so that's I think in over the next several months it will continue to stay moderated or come down a little bit, which will have an impact on bringing down some of the fuel costs
That's
in
when
Belize.
we're going to feel
that a little bit of relief. But I mean, there's so much to talk about, and
I know you
there's
don't
not
have
a lot of
much time,
time. But going into with all of the topics discussed, why then, or what was the necessary push? I know that this is a conversation we've been having for the better part of 20 years, 15 years or so, but why now then did the government believe that it was a good time to pursue the $5 minimum wage increase? Even with all of this happening?
And even after the warnings of the Belize Chamber of Commerce saying that going into a $5 minimum wage,
Right
like
away.
put it there automatically, will eventually have a significant effect on the MSMEs, which are, of course, the majority when it comes to providing jobs or businesses in the country. Why now just $5 rather than the advice of push it here, then we put it there, then we put it there?
Well, I would say quite a bit of analysis was done. I think there was a minimum wage task force, of which the chamber was a member of that task force, and they made their recommendations. I think the Ministry of Labor also had engaged a consultant to assist in what process would be undertaken to implement the minimum wage adjustment. It was a Plan Belize manifesto commitment. Just how it would be implemented was not spoken of in the manifesto. So that type of engagement was taken on and consultation taken on. But ultimately, the Ministry of Labor made its recommendation and Cabinet made its decision. There are economic views with respect to the extent and the approach taken, and we can have certainly discussions on that all day long. You might be surprised where my position is on it, but certainly that decision has been taken. The reality is, on a fiscal, from a fiscal standpoint, it is what you would call an inflationary action in a time of high inflation. So the jury is out as to what will be the impact of the implementation of that adjustment. And that's, I think, what the chamber has spoken to their representatives and say we have to wait and see what will be the impact. But yes, that is timing-wise a concern as far as its implementation and the dramatic implementation. We also have to look at our export competitiveness. Belize has its challenges, but because of lack of economies of scale in its competition with other products or with other countries in the products that it produces. So we have to be sensitive to our export competitiveness. Certainly this will impact on that as well. So there are, I don't know if the word would be negative, but negatives when it comes to what the impacts can be or may be. But we can only wait and see because the decision has been made and it's already being implemented.
Given the analysis, and I know we have to wrap up, but given the analysis that was done prior to implementing the $5 minimum wage, were there any points where there were hypotheticals as to what may occur in terms of unemployment, in terms of the inflation rate, in terms of poverty rate? Because I, as you rightfully said, right, this is we're in inflation, and this might create a higher percentage of inflation in Belize. Can we afford it? And is Belize prepared to take on whatever happens thereafter?
Well, there will always be an adjustment, just in terms of an open market. The market adjusts. Whether that may mean a slowdown in employment or even a reversal in the employment process, that those are possibilities. If you just look at demand and supply, what is the impact of an increase in price? That will have, that will tell you on a basic level what would be a possible impact. So you just have to look at that and have an idea of what some of the impacts can be. That said, you mentioned about poverty. And one thing I would like to highlight is the efforts being undertaken by the Statistical Institute of Belize. I am certainly someone that is very data driven, and so it's important for me that we gather as broad a set of data to inform on policy analysis and policy decision making. And the Statistical Institute of Belize has been going through that process of not only the labor force survey and expanding on the questions and the data points that it accumulates, but also in putting together a multidimensional poverty index. And for the first time, Belize has done so. I think, again, that will be published in the next couple of weeks at most. But it's very useful to have that kind of data. What you will find is, in terms of our prior data or prior analysis, where we looked at the poverty rate just on a purely monetary basis. In 2018, 2019, we're looking at around 52%. Right now, with a more robust analysis, what we're identifying is that the poverty rate is significantly lower than that 52%. But you also learn where the heightened levels of poverty are. Obviously, Toledo is one of those, for example. But you also identify that on rural versus urban, where the level of poverty is. Some of the basic things that education level, age group will have higher levels of poverty. So no formal education have the highest levels of poverty.
Yeah.
Women and the level of poverty that women have versus men.
Yeah.
So all those are what are captured in that analysis and allows you to know better target poverty and how do we reduce, mitigate poverty levels,
which we do
for Belize.
Especially when it comes to women in that poverty line. We something we must change. But we know that you have to go. Final question, and I'm sure, sum it up in a minute if possible. What can Belize expect with the economy in 2023?
Well, we've experienced a resurgence in our economy, but we undoubtedly have significant headwinds in this 2023. We spoke about inflation and what can we do to mitigate inflation. We have to make sure we take those steps. We also have to focus on fiscal position. We can't overspend. It's not hunky-dory out there. We're still not out of the woods and we still have a long ways to go. So we have to prioritize our expenditures, both our recurrent and our capital expenditures, and look at how we utilize the scarce resources of our tax revenues very carefully, very prudently. There's a lot that we can do, but at the same time, there's a lot that we can't do. So we have to continue to manage our finances prudently and look at how we continue to encourage investment in the country. Foreign direct investment plays an important role and can play an even bigger role in our economic development going forward.
Wonderful.
All right. Yeah. Right way to sum it up. Thank you so very much. Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance, Honorable Christopher Coye. Thank you for joining us. And we do hope that we could get you back and continue to have these conversations so Belizeans are cognizant of where their economy is and where we can go as a people.
I'm requesting 40 minutes of your time. Thank you.
Thank you and have a great
Thank you
day.
very much.
We're about to take a break, and when we come back, we're sure that you had a lot of turkey, a lot of ham, and cake over the Christmas holidays. But it is that time of the year where we go into the gym and we try to work it out. Shehan Kelly is going to be here to tell you exactly what to do, how to do that.
We come back.
When we come back, stay with us.